and a 10-second times the charm. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see happen in FNAF 3? In a way it's possible, and it appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described as having scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired in the first place, since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location? So is that unfortunate incident actually William? There are plenty of other people that it could be as well, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But with William continuing to use the suits afterwards and putting it on like we hear in FNAF 3, and then again he ends up failing in FNAF 3 as well, it's unlikely, so no. And a 9, Golden Fredbear. One theory that I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure mostly started around FNAF 4, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp and lifeless in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't physically move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child would be the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true, based on characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night, although I guess that might not mean much, and just like coloring and size. Since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have to be, since Fredbear would have to accommodate a human plus the robot parts, and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since, you know, Golden Freddy would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter much apparently, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then went to Burn Trap. But from the evidence, it seems like Golden Freddy is merely an illusion or a hallucination created in the mind of Michael Afton. See our Golden Freddy was never real video for more info on that, because that proves this idea wrong. And you're all gonna be mad at me, but you know what? That video deserves more love, or at least interaction. And at 8, Elizabeth Afton. I've seen a few people asking if or assuming that Elizabeth Afton was a victim of a Springlock failure, and the truth is, she wasn't. The Circus Baby animatronic isn't a Springlock suit, since a Springlock suit in this case is defined as a suit that contains robotic parts, but uses a special mechanism that when cranked moves those robotic parts to the side so that a person can climb inside and wear the robot like a suit. The Baby animatronic isn't one of those, because there's no way to actually wear this animatronic. Baby it's just a robot, so there is no way that she could have Springlocked Elizabeth. Elizabeth is just a normal victim of her father's killing spree, which resulted in her somehow wanting to make him proud, despite him being the reason she's dead. Directly. Like, not even an, he just because he made the animatronic thing. No. Nobody else had a hand in her death aside from him. But she still wants to make him proud. I don't know, I guess Baby crushed her body and then her sanity too. Which, I mean, I'd understand. That's pretty rough. And at 7, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before the Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve a Springlock failure or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, finally actually, you know, took care of his worst enemy. Or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms that's inside of her that she used to kill Henry. I mean, hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time, or maybe the right suit at the right time for him. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to, because, I mean, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately. I mean, it's true, it doesn't. Henry dying doesn't really mean much overall for the FNAF lore, okay? We didn't even know that he was alive until FNAF 6, for God's sakes. So maybe, for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way rather than just burning him alive. And at 6, Unintentional. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions by William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that is not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby at the very least, we know that these were made in order to kill. we know that was a thought in his brain, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to think that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. More on one of them in a minute, but honestly, if William made the fun times with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks. And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal bars, cogs, gears, and more into the same place your body would take up, it was made with pure intentions, then you need therapy more than I do, okay? I have some numbers you can call. Especially when a normal animatronic and then a suit for your employees would be cheaper and less likely the focus of a lawsuit. Speaking of which, halfway through into number 5, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is the primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awaken. Unlike the others though, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suits on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her face plates are very hard to spot. She is also almost entirely purple. The glowing accents inside her suit resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and overall her body is very slim like the original toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider, which is making me all sorts of confused. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. So yeah, not confused anymore. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother, tried spray on tan, still very pale. Why is this relatable to me? Why are these two, the two Springlock victims from Final Nights 3 so relatable? No matter what I'll do, I'm always gonna be pasty, and you know what, I'm okay with that. However, I did rank this above Grim Fredbear because it's Chica. And look at how they massacred my baby! Oh man, I'm sorry, mommy. These transgressions will not be accepted. And a poor crying child. Okay, now this one's certainly gonna make people mad, but there's no way that I could do this list without mentioning the greatest debate of literally anyone yelling at me ever. The amount of people who have messaged me on Instagram or on TikTok yelling at me in my TikTok comments or in the YouTube comments telling me that the bite of 83 is somehow a Springlock incident bothers me to my core. I say this every time I bring it up. It's not a Springlock failure, okay? The fact that a load of people consider this to be a Springlock failure is the myth that I'm addressing. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, okay? There's no Springlocks that could have a chance of failing, since, you know, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanisms failing to hold the robotic bits away, meaning that it snaps back into animatronic mode when a person's inside. That's why it's bad if there's a person inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanisms inside the mouth either, because that would always be in animatronic mode. Like your head, your eyes would line up with the opening of the mouth so that, you know, you could see. So yeah, that's kind of, plus I don't think anyone who is 7 feet tall working at Freddy Fazbear's. No, they're in the NBA. The jaw also just moves up and down, okay? Truthfully, I don't know how much of the community believes this to be a Springlock incident, because the comments are always going to be filled with more people that are against it than for it, because if you're for it, you don't really feel the need to comment about it. But it's still concerning the amount of comments I'm seeing and the amount of DMs I get on Instagram, okay? Which, by the way, follow me on if you don't hate me, because I need to get past 20. I get to 19 and it goes back down. I have to get past the 120, you know? But ultimately, in number 2, Springlocks are real. Okay, you see, if I was to actually do like a cosplay of the purple guy and actually do it without it being a joke, I'd probably end up using a purple phone case, because, you know, I gotta reference the phone guy. But I don't need a Springlock crank, because those aren't actually a thing in real life. While the term Springlock is used in real life, it is a totally different mechanism from the actual FNAF thing, okay? I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from the Springlocks and You How Not to Die remastered thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs. From my research, what I gathered was that a Springlock in real life is in the simplest of terms if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real Springlocks just simply brings you back to that page or quotes that page, so there's really only one source. Springlocks, as they're used in the games, do not exist in real life, alright? That is a myth. The term is used, but it's two separate words instead of one, and they mean totally different things. so please stop. And finally, in at number 1, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook of all things, and then confirmed in the FNAF movie scripts that Scott ended up tossing after he talked about them on Reddit. And honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, but there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way, I don't know. Maybe she ends up possessing Golden Freddy after all, I don't know, okay? We figured that he could be a Springlock suit and then that he had like the guts removed or something like that, hence the slumped over nature as I talked about earlier. But if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting it? Because like, that seems like something you'd notice. I don't know, but maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. But for a suit technician, he also did, you know, get into the animatronic when it was wet, something that he was definitely smart enough to avoid. But yeah, Cassidy being a Springlock victim has very little evidence, if you can even call it evidence though, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna deem this one a myth. Light your torches, get your pitchforks, come at me in the comments section for saying that, because I know you're going to. I can't avoid it every time, but you're not going to change the outcome of this video, alright? It's already uploaded, you can't change it. It's too late. In at 10, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and while they are from the main FNAF universe, this is a fan theory, so it counts. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole, and instead of the individual Springlock mechanisms that are present within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the Shadow Animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions, and while there are holes in this theory, this is, like, potentially the case. It's an idea at the very least. So yeah, Shadow Animatronics are fan Springlock victims, because it's not confirmed. That's how I made it work. In at 9, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists in Final Night's 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on night 5 and is found by the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color, while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place, and the inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during the jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. I was going to make that a joke, but I actually wrote that into the script, holy crap. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow Animatronics are Springlock victims, which was confirmed to be false by Scott when he stated that William was a Springlock failure, but still, okay? On the museum level of Final Nights, which unlocks after night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. In at 8, Fred Trap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there actually are Fredbear versions of Springtrap, which is kinda cool, but I mean, kind of expected. Fred Trap is exactly what you would expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap for me. I mean, I don't know, I guess for some reason I think bears are scarier than rabbits. Don't know why I would think that. But I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of it, but that could also just be idle speculation. There's another theory that I have that maybe he was going to use the Fredbear animatronic, but then after his son got killed by it, he switched to Bonnie. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead kid. Yeah, so Fredbear is definitely one of the more strangely unique versions that I've seen for this list, and you know what? I'm pretty damn impressed. These designs are pretty good. And at 7, Kelsey. The New Kid from 1:35 AM is a story from Third Fazbear Frights book. The story revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts. They aren't really popular, you know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they try to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time Devin grows jealous of Kelsey, because, you know, he's adored and loved by everyone in the school. So, in an act of revenge, or to maybe try to gain control over him, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned and Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. I guess to try to humble him, I guess? I don't know. I don't know why you thought that this would be a good thing, but obviously the plan goes horribly wrong because it's a FNAF book. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks ended up failing, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, causing all of the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth because he doesn't think about fingerprints, and snap. The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out. But not before seeing a body in the suit, with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. I don't know, okay? Could this be a character that we have yet to see in the games? Probably not. It's just the character in the book, alright? This doesn't happen in the games, okay? It's a myth, and this is just a book thing, okay? Stop. In its 6th Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, now he is a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has bugs coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets, he's missing the exosuit on his right foot, and his character is holding a flesh-colored, at least colored, it's probably flesh-made, let's be honest, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or like blood tendril strands connecting to the side of his head, okay? It's horrifying. It's a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 years old when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Yikes. This kid could have been the next best Fortnite player. In at 4, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurring antagonist in Dormitabis. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear, and Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while someone is being killed outside. He's the predecessor to both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear, but Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts as a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they look slightly similar, the only similarities it really has to Freddy is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Which, I mean, I guess is the whole character. Am I Real's second form is the form that resembles Springtrap. This form has a green color, much like Springtrap does, and actually contains human remains. Great. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side, and there's a big hole that can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering, because, you know, it has a corpse inside. His lower jaw is slanted and worn down. He doesn't have it's not circular like Cake Bear's. He has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso as well, revealing organs. He has rips and tears covering his arms, revealing more human remains, and he just appears to be missing like a finger on his right hand for whatever reason. And you know what? No matter what, it's still terrifying to look at. And of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitabis, okay? Because like, have you ever played Dormitabis? Have you seen these guys? They're terrifying. Just wait. Getting close to the end of number 3, Not Beefed Up. The fact that these animatronics are incredibly powerful is absolutely an insane thing that nobody really seems to grasp. Like the fact that Fredbear was able to crush a child's skull, something that we've covered how crazy he is. Imagine if that was an employee, okay? Like ignoring the fact that you think it's a Springlock incident or that it's a Springlock suit, the amount of power that jaw has is a hazard for everyone who comes into contact with it. Like goddamn. And before you say anything, okay, it wasn't a Springlock failure. I don't know how many times I need to go over that. There's no Springlocks in the mouth, and they weren't active at the time. Okay? It can't be a Springlock failure. So these animatronics are just insanely powerful animatronics, alright? Which would be explained by them being intended to kill, which also explains why it would have the power to crush crying child's skull. The way I see it, William probably wanted to use the Fredbear suit as his kill suit because, you know, Freddy's the more popular character, but then he had to change to Bonnie after, you know, his son was killed in the suit, especially considering how he saw Elizabeth end up possessing Baby, so he was probably worried that Crying Child did the same with Fredbear, so yeah, that's the way I see it. But ultimately, in at number 2, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer, he stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitabis, okay? Garvey is the penultimate antagonist in Dormitabis. As a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children and later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap. He was then burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire, unlike our William Afton, but that's not only where he differs, because Garvey is more gooey. He's a more gooey or gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. And it's also actually not William Afton, since this game was released before the official name reveal, even before FNAF 4. So, yeah, he's Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you end up wanting to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon monkey from hell that even Satan doesn't want around, okay? He's like trying to like send it away. He's like, yeah, no, don't. Like, you're seeing pictures, okay? Like, tell me, do you think that it shouldn't be on this list, okay? Because if you're saying that, you're lying. I can tell. And finally, in at number 1, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game. The fan game, which if I say the name will spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, just go to the bloopers, but like, thanks for watching. But either way, I'll give you the chance to do that. Okay, there we go. That was your chance. You're done. A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Phisnom on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018. And you know, since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's gonna be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different set of tasks each night and must complete said tasks before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of this game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all. I don't know about you, some of you I do because I've seen the comments, but I would rather not get Springlocked. It's also revealed that you are William Afton in this game, but you know what, it's you, so it's good enough for me. In at 10, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now, okay? Everything was going well at first, they couldn't pin him down, and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make him truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room that they can't normally access and then uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims that he claimed so long ago. And seeing these victims causes William to panic. Understandably, I mean, they're freaking ghost kids and they're also the ghosts of kids that you killed. So, yeah, then this absolutely animatronic genius, the technician that has made the suits, handles the suit maintenance, and explained to every employee the proper procedure for putting these Springlock suits on, climbs into the Spring Bonnie suit that he actually uses to kill, and then climbs inside in such a panic that he actually didn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, and, you know, literally everything else, probably also his sweat, which caused the Springlocks that were active in this moment, since it was in suit mode, to fail. And I feel like that moment is one of the most confusing mysteries. Why did he do that? He knows better. If he can avoid the cops for that long, why did he think that this was all just gonna be fine? Dude. In at 7, Shadow Spring Bonnie. Shadow Spring Bonnie is one of the 2 primary antagonists of Final Nights 2. He is one of the final animatronics in the game. Shadow Spring Bonnie resembles Springtrap, as to be expected when mentioning Springlock suits, but similar to Springtrap, he lacks the suit on his feet and has a majority of his right ear missing. Overall, he has rips, but not any real missing limbs or parts at all, which is a stark contrast to the burnt animatronics in the first 4 nights of this game. His face glows white, which is noticeable when he's in the hallway, but also gives him a more sinister appearance and pushes the something supernatural that most of the Shadow animatronics have, like with Shadow Bonnie from FNAF AR. Shadow Spring Bonnie takes the role of Burnt Freddy and Burnt Foxy on night 5, which means that he's very fast, so the player needs to seal the vent quickly, otherwise you'll get jump scared. He also may appear in the hallway, but if he does, never use your flashlight, otherwise you'll get insta-killed. Instead, you need to inspect his face when he appears there, and if he's twitching, close the door. A rattling sound will be heard so that you know he's left. And the fact that you need to look at his face to see if you're in danger just makes this even scarier, especially considering the fact that most of what you need to do relies on fast reflexes, and then you're just sitting there trying to figure out if he's really twitching or if that's just you going crazy. Not from personal experience, I don't know. What? And at 6, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all time, okay? We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sounds of multiple animatronics banging at his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know that he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories is that the animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of events for the Springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have the exact years for the things getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one, or maybe he tried to use it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just doesn't want us to know that yet or something, and what we hear could just be the FNAF 3 cutscene. I mean, I doubt it, but it would be absolutely hilarious if he ended up pulling that on us, okay? And for all those saying that Phone Guy can't be Afton because Afton is British or whatever, so is Tom Holland, okay? It's called acting. You can fake an accent, especially if you're a serial killer who's trying to evade everything, you know? Kinda, yeah, it's a thing. Halfway through into number 5, liability. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way with enough room for a human to fit inside is insane, and while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers an hour in huge giant metal death boxes, so maybe we can't really complain. While yes, they do have their faults, there's nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and human suit. It's an incredible feat of technology, even if just absolutely the dumbest idea ever. Because it's terrifying for the same reasons that it would be in game. Someone can dress in it and pretend to be a robot, okay? It can clamp down on you in any second, and it has done so multiple times before. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they did not need to end up creating, but like, I don't know, like these things are so hella deadly. Why would both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them? Especially Henry, like goddamn. Just make a separate suit for the animatronic, okay? Like make a separate suit that your employee can wear. It's the employees, the people who run your business. They make you money, so you know they don't end up dying from robotic bits replacing their normal human organic bits in a hot suit that fails when it gets moist. Sweat, breathing. Yeah, I would never get in one of those things. Even if there hadn't been an incident before, okay, that just seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I don't want to be the one whose family sues because I'm too dead to do it myself, alright? So, no. It's a myth that they shouldn't have gotten sued. In at 4, the Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that was, is actually a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no real harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure would definitely provide enough power to do that, since, the Springlocks themselves would snap with a ferocious velocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to actually crush a skull thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics ended up getting suspended, because now one of their own employees was bit and then they had to promote him and then fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So yeah, was the Bite of 87 a Springlock failure? Maybe. And was it the moment that caused the Springlock suits to be retired? I don't know. Okay, it also could have been the FNAF 4 bite. But considering the FNAF 3 phone calls, it actually seems to be this bite though, since in FNAF 2 we hear about someone using one of the yellow suits and not mentioning the Springlocks until FNAF 3, meaning that they were probably still in use normally come 1985, and Crying Child died in 1983, so it was probably the Bite of 87 that got them suspended, so there you go. Getting close to the end in number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Stage Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity, but it's definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, so let's focus on that one. He is 100% the scariest animatronic in this series. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare spring trap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is dark yellow in color. He sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kind of like Glitch Trap. And then, like the other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has one pair of hollow, dark eyes that will steal your soul. I added that last part, but it's probably true. In Final Nights 4, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths on his shoulders resembling fungi, and a kind of a gooier appearance overall. overall. It's like the slime girl from YouTube if she made a FNAF character. He's also missing half of his right ear like Springtrap in FNAF 3, and his suit is more greenish in color this time around to be more like Springtrap. And oh my god, this thing is still terrifying, and it's more terrifying than Springtrap, okay? This is what Springtrap should have been. Or honestly, this is what I think like a Nightmare Springtrap would look like, okay? This is like a prototype burn trap in my eyes, or the way I'm thinking, like Melt Trap, the next iteration of Afton. And finally, in at number 1, Double Trouble. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Springlock Bonnie suit that we see in FNAF 3? It is possible, okay, and it certainly appears like this could be the case in the FNAF novels. Well, it is the case in the FNAF novels, but because of that, it could be the case in the games. Since William in the books is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before actually becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason that the Springlock suits were actually retired? Since we do hear of the unfortunate incident at a sister location, so is that unfortunate incident instead William? There are plenty of people that it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, because you know, he's kind of up there, and I mean, he doesn't really seem to care about anyone else, so if they failed on them, why would he retire them? But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on after, you know, when like the room was wet in FNAF 3, this could be unlikely unless he just doesn't have the capacity for trauma, but it's still possible either way, okay? So since this list is about mysteries, I feel like this deserves to be on it. And you know what? Be the capstone.
Number 10. Springlock doors. Something that has come up multiple times over the course of all of these games, a question that still has yet to be answered, is how do the doors open if the power turns off, considering that they're mechanical doors? Well, what if the doors are actually spring-loaded and it's the power that holds them in place, and then when they turn off, they just snap upwards, I guess. The other strange thing in general about the doors is that they slide upwards, not sideways. That just means those straight looking sheets of metal are actually able to curl up somehow, being stored in the ceiling, like a garage door, although I don't think that's what's happening, or that there is a wall directly above for that door to slide into, which would be a lot of convenient wall stacking, especially if this is a one-level building. Then it really doesn't make sense. Either way, I can only imagine that these doors would even be capable of springing open if it was the power alone keeping them shut, and that they are somehow spring-loaded to always be open, unless the power is on to push them down. That's the only way we can rationalize the way they work. Maybe this is also why our power runs out so fast as well. After all, I'm assuming it would take quite a bit of force and therefore power to keep them in place if they were spring-loaded. Number 9. Kelsey is Andrew. Kelsey is the new kid in one of the stories from Fazbear Frights, number 3, 1:35 AM. Coincidentally, I think one of my favorite books in the Fazbear Frights series. The story itself is also titled appropriately The New Kid. It centers around Kelsey, who is a new kid at school that everyone likes because he is so friendly and good looking. In the end, Kelsey ends up being betrayed by his new friends that he's made, who try to scare him by taking him to an abandoned Freddy's location and making him dance around in a Springlock golden Freddy suit, which of course malfunctions, killing him. Later on, one of the friends comes back for Kelsey only to get stuck in the suit himself and see a corpse inside that doesn't seem to match Kelsey's appearance. This corpse is noted as having black curly hair, which led many fans of the books to speculate that Kelsey is in fact the vengeful spirit Andrew, who also appears in another story later on in the book series, The Man in Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book. In that story, the vengeful spirit, whom many believe to be Andrew, one of the spirits that possesses the Stitch Wraith, appears as a dark boy with curly hair wearing an alligator mask. With a description of his hair matching that of the corpse found inside the Springlock golden Freddy suit, it's easy to see why people think Kelsey is Andrew. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about all of the Springlocks, so many Springlock things, so springy, so locky, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Plush Trap is from Sister Location. And what's more, might also be an older model Springlock suit? Based on what Circus Baby says about the Springlock suit we are stuck in coming from her old location, we could theorize that Plush Trap is also a Sister Location Springlock suit, especially since Plush Trap looks much older by comparison. But why do we think Plush Trap is also a Springlock suit? Well, it's interesting that in the book Fetch, we learn more about the Plush Trap animatronic, where it is implied that it can mimic the voices of other folks, something that prior to Fetch's release, only Sister Location animatronics seem to be capable of. This is what makes us think that Plush Trap comes from Sister Location and perhaps was an older animatronic brought over from Circus Baby's previous location. While Plush Trap doesn't really fit in with the overall aesthetic of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, we do know that an older Springlock suit was also kept there. Does that that mean that Plushtrap is also an old Springlock that initially was its sister location, just based on the voice mimicking? If so, how did they get to be with the Nightmare animatronics? And also, who wore the Plushtrap suits if they were ever worn, if they were Springlocks in that way? Was it designed for a shorter employee or possibly for kids to wear? Also, just to be clear, I'm not implying that that is the Springlock suit that we are in Sister Location when you're playing the game, because yeah. I don't know how tall Michael Afton is, but I don't think he's as small as Plushtrap. Number 6. Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. I think I said that all right. This theory, I believe, has been debunked, so just a word to the wise about that, but I still thought it was a pretty cool theory that existed, and I personally like the sound of it. I think it's a neat theory, hence why I'm gonna share it here with you, even though it's been discredited. But just know, we know that. The theory posits that Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie were both victims of a Springlock failure. Phone Guy talks about the sister location experiencing multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, leading some fans to think that might explain the shadow animatronics we see and what exactly they are. Spirits who are attached to the suits that they died in, but were for some reason unable to fully possess them, instead becoming a shadow-like version of that animatronic. I just think it's a cool idea. I mean, shadow animatronics are so mysterious to me, so when I find cool stories that could explain how they work, their theories, I love them. Number 4. Bite of 83. We know that Fredbear was the one behind the Bite of 83 based on the minigames we see in FNAF 4, and we also know that CC was the victim of said bite and eventually died of his injuries. But what we don't know is why the bite happened. However, if you look deep into the lore surrounding Springlocks, it feels like a no-brainer here. Sorry, no pun intended, crying child. Sorry about that. We already know that Springlock failures have pretty much been an ongoing problem since the creation of the suits, and we also know that Springlock failures on a massive scale eventually got these kinds of suits retired. So what if the Bite of 83 was the major beginning of that? What if the bite happened because of a Springlock failure itself? All the clues seem to be pointing us in this direction. A technical issue is the only real explanation, is the animatronics themselves seem to have not been inherently malicious, not until they were bonded with spirits which lingered inside them, making them vengeful. And so if there wasn't a spirit in there, then we must assume there was a technical error, a Springlock malfunction. Number 2. Springlock suits were designed to malfunction. You have to wonder, when you learn how easy it is for a suit to malfunction, if the suits themselves were ever actually made with the intention of functioning in a safe manner. It seems more likely that they were made with the intention to do harm. The Springlocks can malfunction if not wound up securely and properly before the wearer dons the suit. Not winding up the springs properly can result in them simply going back to their original position, impaling the wearer. The thing that I find very suspicious is how a small amount of moisture, such as that which comes from heavy breathing or even just moisture in the air, can cause the Springlocks to completely loosen. These are also suits that you'd think were intended for you to move around in, acting as the character you were dressed up as, and yet in Sister Location we are warned not to move too much, as this can actually set off the Springlocks, implying either the locks were not at all secure when the suit was put on us, or that they are so temperamental that basic movements could set them off, never mind jumping around, dancing, or in general performing as the character that you happen to be dressed as, which is what I'd assume would be expected normally of an employee donning a mascot suit. Number 1. Henry sabotaged the Springlock suits. We don't really have a lot of clearly defined lore from the games that lets us know who really made all of the animatronics between William and his business partner Henry. In some continuities, it's implied that William is more the inventive one, whereas in others, William is more business savvy and Henry is more robotic savvy. It could be possible that the two were actually a little bit of both. I think that makes the most sense just based on everything we've learned about them. If this is the case, who's to say that Henry wasn't the one behind the Springlocks, and perhaps after losing his daughter, sabotaged said Springlock suits while in a vengeful state. When William, however, did not die from Springlocks impaling him, Henry had to resort to other means later down the road, like what we see in Pizzeria Simulator, with him rounding up all of the former animatronics and then burning the place to the ground. Or potentially with Henry being behind the burning down of Fazbear Fright, which also was a suspicious thing that happened, and we don't really know who's behind it, but I feel like Henry could make sense there.
And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after the Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And it ain't the new kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No.
Number 7. Kelsey is crying child / Cassidy. While Kelsey being Andrew could make some sense, others have speculated that the corpse found inside the suit actually belongs to Cece, crying child. This is obviously because of the physical description of the corpse, which has curly black hair. A lot of people coming back to that curly black hair for a lot of these theories. This description matches the appearance of crying child, who also appears to have black and curly or wavy hair based on what we see in the games. But Kelsey is blonde. How does he fit in? Well, it is possible that Kelsey is the amalgamated manifestation of both Crying Child and Cassidy, who perhaps both haunt Golden Freddy if in this continuity they were both victims and have decided to share possession of the animatronic. Neither of them of course was blonde, but they could be changing their appearance together, using a disguise to go out in the world and trick bullies into trusting them. Cassidy could also possibly be considered the more aggressive personality, while Crying Child could be considered the nicer side, and also might bring the masculine appearance to the table when it comes to their disguise. Because obviously Cassidy was a girl, so yeah. Number 5. Yellow Suit. In FNAF 2 on night 6, Phone Guy's call reveals that he is surprised you came into work at the location, as it is meant to be shut down for a while. He tells you that there was an incident that happened involving the yellow suit in the back, which many have theorized to be the springlock suit used in the missing children incident, where 5 victims went missing. Some even think that this phone call is referring to that incident. Phone Guy claims that someone wore the yellow suit, and ever since the animatronics have been acting strangely. Is it because they had victims stuffed into them, and possibly because those victims' souls are making the animatronics behave more aggressively because they're possessing them? I don't know, but it makes sense. Number 3. Funtime Bonnie is a springlock suit. Funtime Bonnie really only appears in sister location as an empty head. But what if there is something else going on with this animatronic? After all, there is one animatronic who we also don't get a good look at in the game, but who we are pretty familiar with by the end of it, just based on our experiences. That would be the springlock animatronic that we are stuck in temporarily. While we never see it explicitly, we also never get to see Funtime Bonnie explicitly either. This has led some to theorize that Funtime Bonnie is said springlock suit and is the older animatronic that Circus Baby was referring to. The only thing that seems odd is how new we'd imagine Funtime Bonnie to look, but then again, it's more likely that the animatronics at sister location are actually really old and have just been well maintained and possibly refurbished, and possibly, you know, hidden away there. After all, Circus Baby's Pizza World seems to be one of the first locations, I think. This timeline is hard to keep track of, so forgive me if I'm wrong about something that has not actually been confirmed. So I guess we can't really be wrong about much.